Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen. I'm an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is just to move my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week and move into the process of writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first reason. The second is just to allow you, the viewer, who have graciously given your time to come by and watch this video, whether you are a regular watcher and subscriber, or if this is the first time you have ever happened to stumble across one of my videos, to allow you to gain some insight into the assigned text for the week. That is why I do these. This particular Sunday, which is September 9th, 2018, the 16th Sunday after Pentecost, and also a time when many congregations, at least here in my context, will be celebrating Rally Sunday, or kind of the beginning kickoff of another program year as the school year is kicked off and we're past Labor Day here in the U.S. and all that happening. Oftentimes a big deal week. But with that going on, our gospel lesson comes out of Mark, just like we were back into Mark a week ago. If you happen to catch that video, we're still in Mark again, and we'll be there now for a while. Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 37. Now this takes place actually right after what we had last week with that particular gospel. Again, if you happen to catch that particular video, and we're moving into it. And now Jesus has been doing some ministry, kind of going around, and it seems that he takes something of a road trip, if we want to call it that. The geography of what happens in today's passage, which is actually two different stories that are partnered up together, is interesting because he goes from Galilee, which is in the northern section of Israel, and then we hear he goes to the region of Tyre. Now Tyre is to the northwest, right on the coast of the Mediterranean, but farther north. So it's out of the region of Israel, or Palestine, whatever you want to call it. And definitely Gentile territory, non-Jewish territory. There were probably Jewish people that were living there, but predominantly more of a Greek society or even Syrian society. It would be in what we call Syria, well, maybe Lebanon today. I don't know. My geography is a little iffy, but definitely farther north, out of the nation of Israel, if we want to call it that. From there, once the first section is done, we hear that Jesus then travels by way of Sidon, which is also on the coast, but even farther north, to then go to a place called the Decapolis, which is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. So he goes from Galilee to the north, then goes farther north in order to come around to the southeast, which is like, huh? And it's kind of odd. If you have a map in your Bible, or if you want to go to Google, I'm sure you can find it too. That's helpful to see that he takes some really weird pathways in order to get wherever it is that he's going. But I don't really know why. I don't have a good reason for that, but it does happen. Perhaps the best reason for bringing this up is just to note that for whatever is going on, Jesus is now operating within these two different these two different situations within non-Jewish predominant territory. And this is perhaps important as we see that he's taking his mission beyond the Jewish nation. And that's important because we'll talk about that in the first account. He actually kind of seems to almost seemingly butt heads over that very notion, that very idea, and yet we've already seen that Jesus has been working outside the bounds of just the Jewish nation as well. And we remember that the promise, even going all the way back to Abraham in Genesis, is that all nations of the world will be blessed through your descendants, through the one who will come from you. So anyway, with all that being said, that's some of the background, and I'm going to jump into this now. Admittedly, this is a troubling passage. It's kind of one of my least favorite passages within the Gospels because of the way that Jesus seemingly treats this woman that he comes into contact with. And I think that will probably become pretty apparent as soon as I read it. So just be aware of that. Okay. Mark 7:24 through 37. Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know that he was there, but yet he could not escape notice. A woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, or a Greek is actually what it says in the Greek, of Syro-Phoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir," or actually Lord, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. All right, that's the first chunk, and I'll go ahead and read the second chunk too. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon, farther north, in order to go south, towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand upon him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," which is Aramaic, that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." All right, that's the second account. A couple of thoughts on that, and then I'm going to move back into the first story. It's interesting that we see Jesus heal this guy. Well, no, let me rephrase that. It's not interesting that we see him heal. We see Jesus healing all the time. But the way in which he does it. Sometimes Jesus can just speak a word and a healing can happen. Sometimes he does it from a distance, as we see with the Syrophoenician woman. Sometimes he does it by just touching the person. Sometimes he does really weird stuff. In this particular case, he seemingly puts his fingers in the guy's ears and then he spits. We don't know if he spits on his finger or if he spits on the ground or what. Probably he spits on his finger and he touches the guy's tongue. And he speaks a word to be opened. Now, and it works. And this guy can hear, he can speak plainly. It's not that he was unable to speak, but he could not speak well. We hear that there's bonds on his tongue, which is a weird way of saying that he just can't speak very well. He's got a speech impediment of some sort, but Jesus heals it. And fame about him spreads because of that. Now, there is some tradition that says that saliva had healing qualities, and that's why he did it. There's another case we hear in John's gospel where a man is blind and Jesus spits in the dirt and mixes it up to form mud and puts the mud on the guy's eyes and tells him to go wash, and when he does, he can see. So this isn't the only instance within the Gospels of Jesus using spit to accomplish something, but it's odd. At the same time, it's odd. Why would Jesus do this in this instance? Why does he do different things in different instances? And we don't really know. Maybe we can think and try and find a connection within the different situations of why does that seem to work in this case, or why would it not work in another case? I don't know. Maybe that's some deeper thinking that I'm not really doing. But so that's kind of what's going on there. That Jesus goes and heals this guy, takes him into private, heals him. We don't know if he's Jewish or not. It's not Jewish territory, but that's not to say that there couldn't have been Jewish people there. We don't really know, and maybe that doesn't really matter. Maybe all that matters is that Jesus heals. I want to back up now to the first part, the Syrophoenician woman. There's a lot of different things at play here. I hate that Jesus makes this statement that could be construed as he's calling the woman a dog. It doesn't seem to, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It's harsh. And it could reveal a lot of different things. It could reveal a racial bias that Jesus would have been partial to, which doesn't fit with our thought of Jesus, and I know it doesn't. Some scholars have proposed that this might be something of a proverb that he's quoting, and yet it speaks to his apparent idea that his mission is to the Jewish people, and that's why he said the children as the Jewish people. So why would you take what's intended for them and throw it to the dogs? To say dogs were not clean animals, they were not pets within that culture as perhaps we think of them now. They were scavengers. They would be in towns, but you would not have them in your home. So there's that regards going on. Basically, whatever is happening, for whatever reason that Jesus says this, it doesn't look good. And maybe we can take a lot away from that. Who are those people that we have that bias towards? And would make this statement. But now there's something else at play here too that's worth noting. we hear that Jesus goes to Tyre, and this is a Syrophoenician woman, so she is a native to the region that he goes to, because he's in that region of Syria, and so he's the foreigner in this case. She might have more social standing in this area than he does. Maybe, maybe not. She's a native. Now, granted, even in that culture, there was definitely the strength of the patriarchy. It was a male-dominated society, and women didn't have the rights. But she might have better social standing in this case than he does. Not only is he Jewish, but he's from Galilee, and apparently Galilee was considered backwater. So there's that going on. And yet, she's desperate. Her daughter has this demon. Chances are likely that caused some shunning within the society that she lived in, within the community which she lived in. And she's desperate. It seems that she's probably tried anything, and she is going to any extreme to help her daughter. I think any parent can probably understand this. Anyone who's ever had a situation where even for a split second you think something happened to your kid and you can't stop it, or you can't do anything about it, it is the worst feeling in the world. And as a dad, I can say that because this has happened with my kids more than once. Fortunately, my kids are okay, but there's been some really close calls, or for any parent who sits and watches their child suffering or sick or in the hospital or you name it. It's very prevalent within our society that this happens, and it just seems wrong. We never want to see anyone suffer, but when it's a child, it's that much worse. And that's what this woman seems to do. She will do anything for her daughter. And when she addresses Jesus, there's something of note. This translation said "Sir." I mentioned before that it's actually Lord. It's Kyrio is the Greek, which is how we translate Lord. And this is the only instance in Mark's gospel when Jesus is called Lord by someone else, like they call it the vocative, like essentially addressing him as Lord. He's called Lord in other ways, but this is the only time when someone addresses Jesus as Lord in the entire gospel. And that's worth paying attention to. And as I think about that, I'm also drawn to our psalm that's assigned for this week, which is Psalm 146. And there's a part, it's 146, verse 8. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. The Lord cares for the stranger. The Lord sustains the orphan and the widow. The Lord, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. And she calls him Lord. She will do anything to help her daughter. And she goes to the one who is able to do something about it. The one who has power over creation, the one who has power over diseases, the one who has power over and authority over unclean spirits in this particular case. And so there's that aspect, but I also think about this is how God views us. God claims us as children. God will do anything to help his children, just like we will, just like parents will. God will do anything, and God has done anything, and that is brought to fruition in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. That God will go to any length. There's no length God will not go to for us, and that's what I take from this. Yes, this is a troubling passage. There's a troubling encounter between Jesus and the woman that I don't like and I can't really make sense of, but I acknowledge it. And yet, despite that, despite whatever is going on behind the scenes here that maybe we're not privy to, this is how God sees us, and that the Lord will do these things. Maybe not in our timing, maybe not in the way that we hope for or that we think is the right way, but that in the end, the last word belongs to God, to the Lord. That's kind of what's happening. This is the direction I'm going with the sermon. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, throw them down in the comment section. We will continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, I hope you have a blessed week. Thanks for tuning in. If you've stuck all the way through this video, and we will catch you next time.